Welcome to the Culture of Writing podcast, where writers, editors, and content strategists from Salesforce talk about how we work together to improve our craft and make content better. Thank you. We are in a high-tech wonderland because this is the very first podcast we've ever done live. And with that, for that, we have a very special guest who flew halfway around the world from the other side of the world, Saket, one of our all-star editors, who's joining us. We're in San Francisco at the Salesforce Tower. So Saket, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
So before we start talking about what we want, we're going to talk about Concise writing, which is a training module that you did, which I think is fantastic. You showed it to me when I had the good fortune to be in Bangalore. And before we talk about that, I want to hear your story. Like editors, I think editing is a vocation. So how did you come to editing?
So I have a background in languages and social sciences. So I studied that in college and university. And my first job was basically with a newspaper. I worked as a reporter and some desk work for a while. Didn't last long because I struggled a lot in that role. It involves a lot of on-ground action, which I'm not great at, I think. But I soon moved, found a role. This was around 2012, just the start of the 2010s decade. So I found a role in online media and found a job which was related to another thing that I'm passionate about, which is sports. So I found a job as a sports editor with an independent company. This company used to create content for a lot of big clients like Microsoft and Amazon and so on. So I was with that company for a while, and in 2016, I got a big break, basically, you can call it. I got a job with ESPN. So ESPN was basically about to launch a new website in India in 2016. So they needed folks who could write and edit and who were interested in sports. So I was hired as part of the team that helped launch the website. I was with them for almost 5 years. But then I started to realize, I really need to expand a little bit beyond journalism and sports because, I mean, as exciting as it is, it can be a really restrictive career path. And I wanted to genuinely pick up other skills. I was genuinely interested in other stuff. So I tried to find roles that would sort of allow me to retain some of my existing skills, but at the same time expand and learn new things. So I made a move towards sort of more, IT and more sort of corporate communications. And that's when I actually found a job with Amazon. Then I worked with Amazon for a couple of years. And I just finished a year with Salesforce. So yeah, very recent move to Salesforce. And this role right now, it's pure tech writing. So what our team does, the team of editors does, is we review the content that our excellent team of writers produces, the product documentation. And it's really important because it's all customer facing documentation. It tells our readers or our customers how our products work and so on. And as editors, we help our writers improve that content or communicate or convey that information in the more effective, more positive way.
Okay, and I can document you're a fantastic editor, but I'm curious, like sports is also like a vocation, right? So back up on sports. You're still a sports nut. I know that, right?
Yeah.
So what made you decide? And this is not a loaded question, but you sort of said, I'm looking at the future. I see kind of tech as well.
Yeah.
Is that what you did?
It was a combination of a lot of those factors, I would say. If you take a step back, some people do really well in things that they're actually passionate about when they pick it up as a full-time job. Some people are not great at that. I realized, halfway down the road that I would like that separation to exist. Something that I'm passionate about, I want to keep that as my passion. Something that I'm good professionally at, I want to pursue that as a profession. So I think that for me, at least personally, that mental separation helps. So I can actually perform my job more effectively. The work-life sort of balance that they call it.
That is really profound, actually, because I think it's a personality type thing. I have found exactly the same thing. That when you're passionate, you kind of have a release, and if it's a hobby or whatever, and then suddenly when it becomes a job, The walls feel like they're closing in.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. For me, it's a convenient separation of the two things. I'm still in touch with that, part of my
Yeah.
personality, very much so. I still have friends who share those common interests, but those two things are slightly separate now.
And I think sports does kind of draw a personality type too. So
Yeah,
you're kind of with the same types of personalities, but
yeah.
it's like working in the donut factory, right? If we work in the donut factory, you can never even look at a donut again,
Exactly.
right? Okay.
That's a great analogy.
But let's talk about
Yeah,
you've done this you work with the writers like
yeah,
you've very eloquently described, and you're helping them make things clear and concise and all of
yeah,
that. And you developed a training module. We're trying to hit, and I'll just say this,
yeah,
at Salesforce, we're trying to create some what we call kind of big rock or big theme training modules.
yeah,
And you've done one. You showed it to me a
yeah,
few weeks ago, a month and a half or so ago. And let's talk about that. It's about concise writing. What
yeah.
is that and why is it important?
Yeah, so the famous Einstein quote, right? If you can't explain it simply or in simple words, you probably don't know you know the content very well. I think while it is about simplicity or actual knowledge, I think that same principle can apply to writing concisely as well. So if you can't explain something briefly or in fewer words, you probably don't have the expertise to explain it to someone. That is my take on things. Now, in general, I think concise writing would be defined as it would be associated with economy of words. And while it is not inaccurate, that is an accurate definition of it. It is about using fewest possible words to communicate your ideas to your readers. I think it goes much beyond that. What I mean by that is, look at concise writing cannot be looked at in isolation. If you're a content creator, whether you're a writer or video creator or any type of content creator, all the basic fundamentals of communication apply to all the things that you do with your writing. So concise writing will always go hand in hand with a lot of these other factors, like your content needs to be complete, it needs to be consistent, it needs to be accurate, and it needs to follow all those other principles along with being concise. When you combine concise writing with all those elements, you can actually achieve a lot of great things. And I think the underlying value here and is customer trust in any business, and it just so happens to be Salesforce's number one value, trust. And forget about what Salesforce believes in. For any business, I think customer trust is paramount. If you don't have customer trust, you actually lose out on a lot of your business and a lot of your loyalty and a lot of revenue as well. So, as a content creator, how do you gain customer trust? There are a bunch of things. You can, first of all, by reducing the time and effort it takes your customers to perform a task or to understand your product or to install your product or troubleshoot, by reducing the cognitive load that your information or your documentation um, contains. By in general, I would say by maximizing their returns on investment, because customers, when they come to your website or your platform or any kind of platform, they invest a lot of time and effort. And you, as a content creator or as a documenter of information, it's your responsibility to ensure that they get precise, accurate, and to the point information when they land on that platform. And that's where concise writing principles come in.
Yeah, and you're tying it to revenue, which is a big deal in
Yeah.
business, and efficiency. And so what are some of the key points? Like if you're giving this to writers, what are the key takeaways, as we say? And
Yeah.
let me stop and mention something.
Yeah.
We don't do these live ever. So this is our very first time. So we have these incredible production people, Charles and Alec, helping us with all this setup. But we're in a public space, so there may be people walking by, or you may hear something. So don't worry about it. Just
Yeah.
want to let you know.
Yeah, I think it offers a lot of practical side benefits as well. When you apply concise writing principles to your content, it offers you better scalability. It offers you better consistency across content. It reduces the possibility of errors or possibility of inconsistent information. And as I said, from the reader's perspective, obviously, it significantly reduces the time and effort that they have to put in. In terms of, I think, overall information retention, it just improves that aspect. Because I have, as part of this training, what we look at is not just how to write concisely or not just factors that contribute to verbosity in writing and so on, but we also look at some of the data and some of the industry trends. And I have looked at some of these numbers are not unexpected, but when you look at them together, some of them can be mind blowing. Now, I'll give you an example. Um, US, some of these are US specific stats, but one of the interesting ones that I read was US adults spend over 12 hours a day on media, all kinds of media.
Wait, U.S. and everybody in the U.S.? Or?
It's based on a survey, so
Okay.
it would be representative of a sample.
Okay,
But
and how many hours? 12?
12 hours a day on all media, and over 60% of that time is on digital media.
Okay.
Now, time spent on mobile phones is close to 4 hours. Again, these are all averages and based on surveys and so on, but you can draw fairly definitive conclusions off of that. On an average, internet users in the US visit 130 pages in a day. That's a big number. And all over 80% of the web traffic that we have that comes from Google. Now, all these stats, what do they tell you? Basically, they tell you that we have more avenues of information than we've ever had before. We have better access to all that information than ever. So, when a reader actually lands on your page, you should actually consider that as a privilege. You are in a privileged position, and that the time that readers actually end up spending on your time is on your website is really precious time. You should try to make the most of that time.
That's a great way to look at it.
Yeah. What happens is basically there's another interesting stat. Like if you actually go deeper into these stats, you can get really nerdy about it. But
Well,
I don't want to go too deep. But one of the other things is, if you look at specifically at written content, for instance, I read a stat that users spend on average just under 6 seconds looking at written content on any web page. So that's 6 seconds. That's very little time to actually grab readers' attention. Now, a lot of businesses, I think, including Salesforce, what they suffer from is you have these pages and pages and pages of documentation really detailing what your product offers, what it includes, all these key aspects of information, which is actually your source of truth, right? Like that should be uh, if you find conflicting information elsewhere, you can always go to the source and find, okay, this is the accurate source of information. But then the majority of the users, they don't come to the actual product's website to find that information. They either find better alternatives that offer compact packaging, information presented in a better format, easy to consume format, easy to understand words, all those things. And among all those things, I think verbosity is a big factor because readers just don't have the time. A bunch of things I think that readers hate. They hate people over explaining things. They don't want to be lectured. Um, yes, in some cases they want to be educated, but in a business setting, people don't come to your website to get entertained. Um, I'll give you a practical example. Even a user who spends hours and hours of the day looking at reels on Instagram or tweets and so on will fast forward through a 1 minute video, a YouTube tutorial about installing something. Why? Because they just want to get to the actual point. When people come in with that mentality, uh, they just want to get to the end very fast. So if there's a 2 minute tutorial and you give me instead of that there's a 1 minute tutorial, I'm going to switch to that one. If you can explain it to me in half a minute, then I'm probably going to switch to that. That's why people end up on these independent blogs, on YouTube, and all these other avenues rather than the source of information. When was the last time you bought an appliance? Tell me.
Oh gosh. I can tell you what I bought. I bought an audio setup
Okay.
for the podcast
Right.
on the recommendation of our podfather at Salesforce.
Okay.
And yeah,
Okay. Okay. Without naming the brand, did you actually go to the brand's website to find installation and how to use
No.
that? Right?
No.
You probably found that either through Google on an independent
Yeah.
blog and so on.
Yeah.
Or that happens because the brand's website, it's not that they don't have the information, they just don't offer it in the best possible
And
format.
your point is well taken. I wanted something very particular.
Yeah.
How do I set
Yeah.
it up? So I did a long tail search. I said, this is exactly what I need. And I
Yeah.
found that
Yeah.
particular answer.
Yeah. That's actually a great segue into one of our sort of guiding philosophies that we have with product documentation in Salesforce, which is what we call jobs to be done. We always write from the perspective of the users in terms of the job that they want to perform. As technical writers, or actually this is a tendency among all kinds of writers, when you're really attached to the actual development of a product, what happens behind the scenes and so on, there's a very, very strong temptation to over document stuff.
I am so guilty of that myself. I really
We all
am.
are. We all are.
Because I think I'm fascinated, and you're
Yeah.
right. That's a great point.
This is the problem that we see a lot in our documentation, and this is why concise writing, sort of a training in concise writing, is really important. Because at the end of the day, the readers is just going to ask, okay, why do I care about this information? What does it do for me? So, for instance, to give you an example, you might have gone through days and weeks of development just to add a simple button on your user interface. All the user cares about is what happens when I click that button, not what went on behind the scenes,
Not the backstory.
not the backstory. That's one example. I mean, it's a very simplistic example, but imagine many more, dozens of these scenarios contributing to your product documentation. It can make your product documentation really difficult to navigate through. So yeah, that is one of the some of the things that we cover in this presentation.
No, that's fantastic. I think your analogy of which we find a lot, and like I said, I'm guilty of most of the sins that you're talking about. But the
Yeah.
analogy of like you sit down to use
Yeah.
sit down to watch a sporting event that you do for entertainment because
Yeah.
it gives you pleasure.
Yeah.
But when you're trying to solve a problem or install something or make something happen technically,
Yeah.
and I will say, anytime I go to technical documentation, any technical documentation,
Yeah.
I'm usually in a very bad mood, right? Because
Yeah.
something's gone wrong and I'm frustrated.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, that's a great actually point. The mindset that your reader comes in, especially a business user, when they come to these specific websites or your website or my website or even a tutorial on YouTube, they have very little patience. They come in with a very specific problem. In many cases, they come in because something is broken and they want to fix it. If you can't do that in the shortest possible time for them, then you're failing them, and you're losing your trust, and you're not giving them, the best returns on their investment.
That's another great point too, is that you talk about 6 seconds.
Yeah.
You got 6 seconds. And no, because I find another point of frustration, again, I'm talking about any technical
Yeah.
documentation, is when I can't discover the solution.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, why people use Amazon reviews and YouTube and things like that. When
Yeah.
people are using jargon or
Yeah.
they're naming features and they're not basing it on what I'm trying to
Yeah.
solve. Okay.
And that, again, I mean, you shouldn't have to ideally go through random reviews or random blogs and so on to find solutions to these problems, because in all likelihood, the solution for that problem or the instructions for that specific job you're trying to perform probably exists somewhere. And obviously, you can't achieve everything just by writing concisely. There'll be a combination of these. I mean, a lot of these factors play a part: the website design, the loading time of your website, your navigation structure, as you mentioned, how easy and intuitive it is. But you can at least address part of it by bringing brevity in your writing. Another thing that readers absolutely hate is with verbosity, especially when they're going in to try and perform a specific task. They don't want people using big words, people just trying to be clever, or just don't be a poet in that situation. That would be my advice to everyone. I'll go back to what I said originally. They're there. They're not there to be entertained. They might spend hours and hours on other websites just going through meaningless stuff or laughing at reels and so on. When it comes to that specific task with a problem with their product or installation instructions about a specific product, they come in with very limited time and even more limited patience.
And they want to be able to discover that,
Yeah,
find it,
yeah,
and meaning all the important stuff gets put at the top.
yeah,
Another concept I think you're raising, which is very good, is that we talk about like all talking about AI,
yeah,
right? And the writer almost becomes like a super editor,
yeah,
but the writer has you correct me if I'm wrong,
yeah,
kind of a super responsibility of understanding all the elements that you pointed out,
yeah,
the website, the navigation, the user
yeah,
experience, and things like that. But the writer has to kind of picture what is that goal, that job to be done.
yeah,
So it's almost like making the writer, I don't know, it seems like job security to me.
yeah. No, it's you're right. I mean, one of the sort of, I wouldn't call it a trick, but sort of a trick that a lot of writers can use is put yourself in the shoes of an extremely frustrated and angry customer. That is, I mean, that seems like an absurd thing to say, but usually that you will end up with solutions that are spot on because when a customer is really pissed or something, what is what is it that you can do to alleviate their fears, or what is it that you can, you know, to calm them down, basically.
I had not looked at it that way. But that's a great point because
Yeah,
that's what I am. That's
yeah,
me. When I'm going to technical
yeah,
documentation, you don't,
yeah,
and I will sometimes, you know how these thumbs up, thumbs down. I'm not talking about Salesforce,
yeah,
but sometimes
yeah,
I'll do thumbs down just
yeah,
because it may be brilliantly done, but it's the wrong thing for me. I'm
yeah,
not looking for that.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, imagine yourself calling any situation that you're calling customer service for any company. You're generally in a pretty unhappy mood. You're either panicking, you're fearful, or you're, either suspicious about the company, you're not sure what to do, what the next step is. So, what the customer service representative should offer, or you expect them to offer you, is solutions and things that would calm you down and answer your questions. The longer they take to answer those questions or to reach that level, the more frustrated you become. That's why even in terms of written documentation, what readers absolutely hate is unnecessary clicks and multiple clicks when uh, just because you as a content creator or writer think that your documentation or what you're creating is beautiful doesn't mean they care about that beauty aspect of it. They care about the functionality of it.
That's a great, these are great points because, no, because I
Yeah,
think when you call
yeah,
and you get a person, and they don't, or they take you through these rote things.
yeah,
Is it turned on?
yeah,
Is it plugged in? And often I know I've made many dumb mistakes,
yeah,
but you feel like you're not being heard and they're
yeah,
not listening to what your actual problem is. And you're kind of saying, well, that's
yeah,
kind of how the writer needs to approach this too. What's
yeah,
the actual
yeah,
point of frustration or problem if we can?
yeah.
Oh, that's really fascinating. These are great analogies.
Yeah, because you always have to take a step back and think about. I'll go back to the point about being attached to your product. What happens is when you spend a certain amount of time in a company or with a certain set of products and with a certain set of individuals, you get attached to a lot of these processes. While that is a good thing in some respects because you really care about your content, you'll a lot of those factors, honestly, the end user doesn't care about. All they care about is, okay, what is the product going to do for me? How do I solve problems related to these products? And if I'm in this situation, what is the immediate solution for me? They actually don't care about, oh, okay, this has this enhancement, has these features and those features, and this is the color we are using, this is the theme we are using, this is the sound we are offering. That is your choice, as a creator, and it's good to be passionate about it from your end, but when you deliver the final sort of documentation about that product, always keep in mind the functionality aspect.
Yeah, I find that's a great point too, because
Yeah,
the only time if I'm fascinated by something,
yeah,
um, then I'll kind of go to the marketing material and want to read all of that. But yeah, the technical documentation stands separate from that, right?
Yeah. No, that's actually a good point about marketing documentation. You have to also find ways, like some of these things belong in other copies. They may still belong, I mean, they may still make good documentation, but it may not be the technical documentation or what we need to include in technical documentation.
Now, what's an unfair question? What's the answer to jargon? Like jargon, because I think, if you're writing on Reddit or if you're writing to a particular development audience, they're probably going to get frustrated if you spell out all the acronyms. But yet, I've been in situations where people are throwing around acronyms, and I don't know what they're talking about. So
yeah, that's a good question. I had jargon listed under the column about things that readers hate in general. But there are obvious exceptions to that rule, and that's why I started, or I will start this presentation with why concise writing always goes in hand in hand with all these other things about completeness, consistency, and clarity. If if an acronym is not causing confusion, or if an acronym is very obvious and intuitive in a specific context, or I'm talking about acronyms, but not necessarily acronyms. Any jargon or industry specific, business specific term, if it's obvious, then you don't need to spell it out. That's a simple take. I mean, you have to be practical and reasonable about it. Just take a practical based on your own experience, and you know your audience well. You know your customer's pulse and what they know and what they get confused about. If you feel there's a very high likelihood of people not following or not understanding certain jargon, best to just spell it out.
Okay, I agree. Yeah. I think that's the key, is that you've just got to have some understanding of who is this audience, who are not everybody, but who are the 80%, right?
Yeah.
That's a great point.
Because to give you an example, for instance, in Salesforce, you have your admin documentation as well as your developer documentation. The way we treat different types of content, or let's say specifically jargon, in those two situations is quite different. Because one set of audience is trying to perform a very specific set of tasks which are very different to what the other set is performing, and one set's familiarity with certain aspects of your product is different than the other set.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
So you'll be giving this to Salesforce employees, and maybe we can look at doing some sort of public module down the line that we can offer.
What we have tried to ensure, and I'm sure we'll try to do that throughout all of our trainings this year, is we try to keep it slightly universal. Like, so a lot of these principles or things that we talk about in these trainings, they can apply to not just writers. In fact, I would say, they can apply to a lot of content creators in general. That's why I keep saying content creators. Obviously not all of them, and we will use obviously examples from our day-to-day work where we deal with a lot of technical documentation, very specific examples. Some of them might be very Salesforce specific as well. But in general, a lot of the principles or the philosophies that we talk about, we've tried to keep them universal so that a lot of different teams can utilize them. Yeah.
That's why we're doing the podcast.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll wrap up on concise writing. But what sports do you? What sports do you follow?
Football, and again the universal term football, not the. Okay, you can call it that if you want.
Not American football.
Not American football, but yeah,
that's
soccer. That's my the go-to sport. I do follow a bit of cricket and tennis as well. I play badminton as well. So.
Oh, really? Yeah. Okay. Do you play cricket?
I used to as a kid. Lately, I haven't had a chance, because cricket, again, it's like a team sport, so you need a bunch of people who are available and ready. And with our busy schedules, it's really difficult to get groups together like that. But yeah.
Cool. Cool. Anything else about concise writing that we?
You'll find it in the training, I think. I've tried to include as many actual practical real world examples as we can, so that it's interactive, it's interesting, and again, kept the number of slides to a minimum, in keeping with the theme of the presentation. So
this is phenomenal. The training I've seen,
Yeah.
I've seen the pilot of it. You gave
Yeah.
it to me. It's going to be phenomenal.
Yeah.
I want to thank you personally because we've never done anything live before, and it's a little unnerving because we're used
It
to
is,
sitting
yeah.
in our right.
Yeah.
So we got all these people walking around.
I'm never comfortable in front of a camera, so yeah, I was quite nervous going in, but yeah, you have I think you made me really comfortable, and thanks to our fantastic behind the scenes
We have a production team.
production team.
Yes,
who's
we're
sitting right.
made the big time. All right.
Yeah, thanks
Thank
to
you.
them as well. Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I
Yeah.
sure appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Thanks for having me.
You're wonderful. Get the hook.
Right? Rock on.
That was great. You were great. You didn't seem nervous at all.
I don't know. I hope I wasn't like fidgety or something.
31
Oh,
minutes.
are you kidding? I'm like,
Oh, so not too long either. So not too much to edit.
no,
Okay.
no, it's not bad. We'll figure it out.